He reaches out his hand of grace to lift us up from whatever may be paralyzing our lives, so that we can walk and jump and dance in newness of life before him.
You know, there's this I was looking at our maybe you've heard these words before. Maybe you've heard these words. I'm not sure if you have, and I'll just read them. Develop a faithful, hopeful, and loving community that inspires people to come to Jesus, become like Jesus, and overcome in Jesus. Have you heard those words? Does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? It should sound familiar, because those are the words of this church's, this specific local church, our vision. And I know you're probably thinking, vision, what do I gotta do, like listening about vision? Why does it matter to me what the vision of our church is, the church that I'm in? What importance does that have for me? How does it impact my life? It has everything to do. It gives us a direction. It gives us motivation. It gives us a goal that we're working towards. And it's okay if you're not working towards it right now, because you probably don't understand what it is. And that's what we're going to go into. You know, at some point in your life, you've probably thought of, or maybe it applied to you, or maybe it didn't, whatever. You thought about being the best, what it meant to be the best, and whether it was yourself or whether you saw somebody that you were like, man, they are really good at what they do. They're really good. And just so you know, I'm going to be talking about goats this today, but I'm not talking about like goats and sheep. This isn't that kind of sermon. The goats that I'm talking about is an acronym, and you know what it is: greatest of all time, GOAT. And sometimes we think about, oh man, to be the GOAT. Yeah. I don't know much about tennis, but I do know that it is a very intense sport. And I do know that there is somebody who is really good at tennis. In some circles, they consider her to be the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And there was a moment. It was a quarterfinal match for the Grand Slam, and Serena Williams was up. The way that I had to look it up because I wasn't too familiar with the scoring and the rules and everything. The way that the scoring works, there's games, there's sets, and there's matches. There's games within a set, and to win the set, you have to have 6 games won with 2. It has to be 2 or the first to 6 with a barrier of 2, or you know what I'm talking about. There had to be 2. But if it was 5-5, then it was the one who got to 7. Yeah, win by 2. That's the phrase that I was looking for. Thank you, win by 2. And so here it is. It's to win the whole match, it was a best out of 3 match. Okay, so the first person to win 2 games. It's the third set. It's a third set because both Serena and her opponent already have a set under their belt. In this set, It's literally match point because Serena has 5 games to her opponent's 1. So Serena only has to get one more. She only has to get one more game to win the set, to win the match, to win that round of the quarterfinals Grand Slam. And one thing led to another, and her opponent beat her 7-5. 7-5. We're talking about the GOAT of tennis. How do you lose just one? All you needed was one more. Somebody asked Serena what she thought about losing. And she said these words, "I don't like to lose at anything. Yet, I've grown the most not from my victories, but from my setbacks." I've grown the most not from my victories, but from my setbacks. Way back when, we're changing sports, it was the Chicago Bulls versus the Utah Jazz. And it was the finals, the NBA finals, and the score was 81-83. The Bulls were down by 2. There was 0.8 seconds left on the clock. 0.8 seconds left on the clock. And the plan was pass the ball to Michael Jordan. That was the plan. Pass the ball to Michael Jordan. When it comes to being a clutch player, he was it. And everybody knew it. So you could see the replays. Everybody is just huddled, just like in this mass right beside the person who's going to be tossing in the ball. And finally, Michael's able to break free, get outside around the three-point line in a position, and it was like split seconds. As soon as he was able to break free, the pass was made from out of bounds to Michael's hand, and he did not hesitate. He jumped up, squared up, jumped up, and he released and missed. It was an air ball from Air Jordan. And he lost the game. He lost the game. And you could see the look on his face of just sheer, utter defeat. But he was to himself. He just turned and walked away towards his not towards his teammates, away from them, just going towards the locker. That moment when everybody depended on you to come through. You could have won the finals with that. Won the game, won the finals. Somebody asked Michael, what do you think about losing? Like, how does it feel? He said these words, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed." What? You literally just told me everything that you did wrong, and you're able to end what you said by, "and that's how I succeed"? What was it about what he was saying that made him confident in knowing that he could succeed? It was that point I don't know if you caught it, that he's failed over and over and over. And I'm sure that he could have kept going, but he had other things to do than sit in a press conference. But the idea is, and we notice this with both Michael and with Serena, that they didn't stop. They didn't stop. They kept trying. They kept going. The losses that they had, they didn't take them for granted. They learned from them. They learned from those losses, and they kept the big picture in mind. They had a goal. And ironically, their goal wasn't to be the greatest of all time. Their goal was to be better than they were yesterday. Their goal was to be better than they were yesterday, and so in their minds there was always room for improvement. And when you have a mentality that there's always room for improvement, it means you're always going to try. You're always going to do the thing that nobody else will do, and that's the thing that's going to set you apart from everyone else. What do I mean by taking something for granted? Webster says that the term to take for granted is to value something or someone too lightly. To fail to properly notice or appreciate someone or something that should be valued. To fail to properly notice or appreciate something or someone that should be valued. They didn't take their loss for granted. They looked at their loss, and sometimes, and I know you must know this feeling, I'm assuming that you do. There's times in my life where I felt like, I can't believe I just did that. I can't believe that just happened. And you can take that loss and you can approach it in different ways. You can approach it excessively, like obsessing over that loss, thinking, oh my goodness, I wish only if this had happened, maybe then this could have happened. And you find yourself in a position that you're stuck. You're unable to move forward because all you're thinking about is what happened, that loss. And it gets to a point when you're actually putting the blame somewhere else other than yourself. Or maybe you're putting the blame on yourself because, that's just the way I am. I've been made that way, and so I can't do it. And you find yourself stuck. That's the excessive extreme. There's also the extreme when assessing your loss of ignoring it. Saying, that basically didn't happen. And you move forward, so you think, but you find yourself somehow, surprisingly, in the same situation that you were before the first time that you ignored the thing that you did. And you ignore it again and you say, it didn't happen. I'm just going to move forward. Positive attitude, keep going forward. But something happens because you don't notice it, but you're still stuck. It's like you're in a hamster wheel and you're doing everything you can to move forward, but you're ignoring the fact that you're in a hamster wheel. So you're not moving forward because you're ignoring the loss instead of taking responsibility for the loss. To take something for granted is to properly, and that's the key word, is to properly notice it. Notice it just the right amount to where you're not stuck, rather you're doing something, you're taking action to move forward. doing something, taking action to move forward. Taking responsibility for that loss. Yeah, okay, but what about off the courts? What about off the courts? Let's forget about the tennis court, forget about the basketball court. What about in our interactions? What about in our interactions and our conversations with others? Like, do we act as though we're afraid to lose the exchange? I'm reminded of a moment a short while back when I was in a social gathering and there was two individuals and they were, it seemed from a distance that they were exchanging words. And it wasn't just them, and so I knew that it might have been safe to approach because there were other people around. There was a young man and a young woman, and I couldn't tell what was going on, but me, I'm just so curious. I had to find out what this situation was, what was going on. So I approached them. I was like, guys, what's going on? What's going on? And then I was quickly approached, and I knew, oh man, Ray, you probably made the wrong mistake. But the young man said to me, Pastor Ray, okay, so listen, this is exactly what happened. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. So she, and then ... And he continued, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, all right. As soon as somebody says, this is exactly what happened, like, that's a red flag to me. I'm like, it's probably not exactly what happened, but I know what you're talking about, and I'm gonna do you a solid. I'm gonna listen to you. I'm gonna hear what you have to say because it's probably something that I could learn from this interaction. And so I listened to what he had to say. To fill you in, the situation was this. There was frosting of some kind that she had on her finger, and she was going to put it on his jeans or on his sweatpants or whatever the pants were, and he wanted to prevent that from happening because he had an emotional attachment to his clothing, and so he put his hand down to prevent that from happening, and the frosting got onto his hand, and so somehow, we're still not sure how it happened, the frosting that is now on his hand eventually made its way to her forehead. And so I'm listening now to her side of the story, and then there's a pencil that's involved, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is awesome. And I didn't tell him this then. Maybe if you see him, maybe if you know him, you could let him know that though this was a jovial exchange, I understood what was happening, and maybe you understand it too. There was an experimentation going on, and I categorized this in my mind as an experimentation with flirtation. And when I recognized that, I was like, this is all good. It's okay. We're all good with this. But what was interesting is when I spoke to him and I asked him, so why did you do that? Why did you put your hand like over there? And the response was, what do you mean? That, of course I was going to do that. It was a natural reflex. She even knew that that's what was going to happen. She basically did it to herself. And I heard this, and the language that I was hearing was an inability to take responsibility for the choices that you make regardless of the situation that you find yourself in. And I thought, man, yes, this is happening in this jovial context, but this concept happens all the time in day-to-day life, in our interactions with others, and sometimes it's not so jovial. It's not so fun. It's not so loving. It's not so carefree. I was at camp, and it was a tween camp event, and one of the things that we love to do at tween camp was have like a beach party where kids can get together around the beach listening to Christian music and playing sports. And there was two individuals playing volleyball together. And these girls were they were just like bouncing the ball to each other, setting it, practicing spiking, and it was just the two of them. And as I was passing by, I heard a few words that were not, in my opinion, appropriate. And so as a staff member, I said, okay, I can't just ignore this. So I approached the situation and I was friendly with everybody, and I tried to make light of the situation, and I was like, what? Why on earth would you say that? And the banter continued, and as the banter was continuing, the intensity and the cruelty of what they were saying to each other also increased. And along with that, both of them were still engaged in bumping and setting and spiking the ball towards each other. But the intensity in which they were doing it was not in the spirit of the game of volleyball, no, it was in the spirit of trying to hurt the other person. And I wanted to help dial this down, and so I'm throwing in jokes here and there, and I'm trying to keep the situation light, trying to tone it back down, and they were saying cruel things to each other, and it got to a point where I said, "Wow, come on now, you got to be respectful. How would your parents feel if you said something like that?" And the response that I heard made me sad. She said, "What do you mean? My mom taught me how to speak like this." She would say things worse to me. This is how I am. You just got to accept it. And I said to I was taken aback. I can't. The one thing that I had a foot to stand on, that I was looking for help from the parental role, was the very thing that made me weak. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. So I said, "I'm sorry." And I walked away. And it made me sad. It broke my heart, because in both situations, I recognized that the individuals failed to take responsibility for the choices that they made, regardless of the situation or the circumstances that they found themselves in. And there's times in my life when I just need a pick-me-up, because I see what's going around, and I'm thinking to myself, I don't like this. Where's the hope? What do I have to move forward? And I came across this verse, Lamentations 3:22. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. And there was something about that just brought hope to me, and I didn't know why right when I saw it, and I decided that, I'm talking about the love of God. I'm reading about the love of God, and this isn't something that I just want to look at, read, and think, oh, well, that was great. I wanted to dig deep. And there's something profound about this particular verse. Not just what it says, but everything about this verse. Starting with the fact that you find this verse in the book of Lamentations. Lamentations might sound familiar to you, like a word lament, which you might know is a word synonymous with sadness, or the feeling of mourning, or the feeling of just utter despair. How can this come from that book? And then you start reading into Lamentations, and it's 5 chapters long. We're not going to read it today, but you are going to read it on your own time, of course, at your choosing. And you start reading it, and you just get depressed. Like, the author obviously was trying to evoke some sort of empathetic emotion when he wrote this, and you get depressed. If you are depressed and you read it, then you feel a sense of understanding, and you're like, oh, it's not just me. If you're not and you're in a good mood, you won't be by reading it. It's the way that empathy works. You feel what the person is feeling. And then I got to reading a little bit more throughout it, and I recognized that even the format of how it's written is different from other places in the Bible, because it's written as poetry, and it's written as a song, so to speak, and some scholars refer to it as like a funeral song. So I'm like, why would people read a funeral song just for kicks and giggles? There's nothing fun or funny about that. And I'm looking for the point of what Lamentations is about, and I don't find it at the beginning, and I don't find it at the end, because I look at the end, and the end is just like the beginning. And then I'm reminded about the fact that it's written like a poem. And I think back, and I remember studying about literary styles and the way that people write. Like, people write things in different ways, and especially in the Bible, like, one of the secrets that I found in the Bible are that, like, the way that something is written is almost more important than what is actually written. And I noticed that there was symmetry between the beginning and the ending, and it was almost as if it climaxed at a certain point in the middle, and then it went back down again. And this motion, this idea of symmetry on both sides and something centered in the middle, reminded me of the word chiastic. You've probably heard of the word chiasm, or like a chiastic structure. And it's a literary form. What it means is that the author is driving to a central point that is physically located in the middle of the whole context. And so if you read halfway, you won't see the chiasm. You won't see it. If you read just the beginning, you won't see it. If you read just the middle, you won't see it. If you read just the end, you won't see it. You have to read the whole context to understand that this is growing to something important in the middle. And the context is the destruction of Jerusalem. And it's written in a personified voice. Jerusalem is now like saying, oh, woe is me, casting blame even to God, who is the cause of my destruction. And we know that it's the Babylonians that are attacking Jerusalem and destroying and killing, and it's not pretty. It's gruesome. But the blame is not on themselves. They're not taking responsibility. Jerusalem is not taking responsibility for the situation that they find themselves in. They're casting blame to something else. And the author was very intentional about doing this because he was speaking for the people, what they were actually going through, the actual loss that they were suffering. And this was a very intentional move on his part. But he also had a message as representative of that same group that is being destroyed. As a representative of that, he has the power to impart the message that he received from God. And we can see a little bit of it starting in verse 19. The thought of my suffering and homelessness is bitter beyond words. I will never forget this awful time as I grieve over my loss. Yet I still dare to hope when I remember this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance. Therefore, I will hope in him. This is the point that Jeremiah is making. This is the goal that he wants the whole church to understand. That though you are suffering a loss, you have a hope. A hope in the everlasting love of the one true God who never loses faith in you. And his faith for you never ceases. It never stops. Some would say that it is unstoppable. And man, I'm thinking about coming to Jesus and overcoming in Jesus and becoming like Jesus. And I think about what we are called to be as Christians. How we are called to wear an L on our forehead. But this L doesn't stand for loser. This L stands for love. And this L we also cannot take for granted. Because the love is not just a feeling. This love is an experience. It's an experience. And if you're feeling stagnant, if you're feeling like stuck, is it possible that maybe you took it for granted? Maybe you looked at it in a way that was not proper. You didn't fully assess it. You went from one extreme, I'm feeling so good, I'm not feeling good anymore. And you're stuck in this state of either feeling really good or feeling really bad. You're stuck in this state of feelings. Or you've gone to the other extreme and you've ignored it. Yeah, you heard it. Yeah, Jesus loves me. That's great. I'm gonna keep washing the dishes. Jesus loves me. It's great, but I'm about to be late for the bus. Jesus loves me. That's great, but I've got stuff to do, classes to do, homework to finish. And you ignore it. And you're stuck. Because you're running through life on this hamster wheel, thinking that you're getting somewhere, and you're not going anywhere. Because you're ignoring the love. And I'm saying, don't take this L for granted. We're called to experience this love. And we have to keep the bigger picture in mind. Because when we're dealing with people, we're always thinking about, I got to get the last word in, I got to get the last one. I got to be the winner. I got to be the one to rise up from this situation. I have to be the one, they have to understand my point. And I'm saying, let love win. Let love be the winner. God calls us to see the bigger picture, to understand the surroundings that we're in, and still choose to let love be the winner. Hold on now. But for love to be the winner, that means I gotta take the L. I gotta lose myself so that love can win. Yes. Yes. And that act of losing something so that love can win does hurt. It does feel uncomfortable because you're not used to it. And that's okay. But the more you practice something, the easier it becomes. But what is the thing that you're losing? Don't lose sight of the thing that you're losing. Don't take that for granted. Because what you're losing is pride. And pride hurts when it leaves. But pride has to leave so that love can grow. And Jesus showed us this in every aspect of his life. Even to the point of saying, I have to be less so that he can be more. That the greatest in the kingdom, the goat, if you will, isn't the one who's beating everybody else and telling them, you can't come to my level. It's the one who went down to the lowest level to lift somebody up who was feeling low. But you can't do that with pride. Pride is a hindrance. Pride keeps you from doing what love would do. And it can go to the extreme where someone might have believed that they have love and get pretty proud of the fact that they got love. Now they're just living in a fantasy because they think that they've got it all. And they've got nothing at all. When I was in 5th grade, I was a professional athlete. We had in Florida at my school, because there were mosquitoes in Florida, we had what was called a Skeeter Bowl. And this was a football extravaganza where all the 5th grade teams, all the 5th grade classes, they had a team and they played flag football at their Skeeter Bowl. And I was fast, not as fast as I am today, but I was fast then, and they wanted me to be the wide receiver. But there was a problem. Even though I was fast and I was tall for my age, my fingers were like spaghetti. Some would call them butterfingers. So when the ball came to my fingers, somehow the ball decided it just wanted to leave. And it didn't stay attached with my fingers. But I worked on it because I really, really wanted our class to rise up above all the other classes. And I worked hard after school. I practiced with our quarterback, and we were running posts. We were doing certain maneuvers, different fakes. And I got to the point when I was so excited because consistently I was catching the ball. And I knew at the time when they needed me, I was going to catch the ball. And that time came. I remember the snap was made. We ran our formation, and there were 2 wide receivers in this formation, and we didn't know which one the ball was going to be coming to. But just seconds after I'm running my post, and I turn over and I look and I notice that the ball is in the air in my direction. At this time, the cornerback was faked out by the tight end, and so he's doing something else, and the safety is nearby, but he's not too close. This is mine. I've got this. And I knew it. The amount of confidence that I had was overwhelming. I was like, no, I really know that I've got this. My position, even though I'm running, I'm running like this. My eyes are on the ball, and I'm looking at it, and I know at the right moment when I need to turn, because I wasn't the jump. I couldn't time it that way. I had to turn, catch it, and I decided that it was easier for me to use my forearms to make sure that I held the ball, to make sure that I secured it. And that's what happened. And I caught the ball, and I was elated. It was still in my hands. I caught the ball. I caught the ball. I caught the ball. And for a split second, I was stuck. Because all I had practiced was catching the ball. And I saw people who were on the sidelines, they were like, go, go. And I remembered, yeah, okay, all right, yeah. I was running, so now I need to continue running. But everything, honestly, is a blur to me. Like, I'm running, but it's all a blur. All I can think of was, oh, I caught the ball. Look at me. I did it. The thing that I thought that I couldn't do, but I practiced hard and I did. I caught the ball. And I was so excited. I remember seeing the cones and the white line in the grass, and I was like, oh, everybody is going to love it. We have now won this game. As I'm crossing the line and I cross the cones, I remember taking that ball because I've seen it before. I know what they do in the pros, and I took that ball. I was like, boom! Yeah! Woo! And I'm celebrating and I'm enjoying this moment for my team because we did it. We did it. What was surprising and confusing was when I saw the safety come towards me, pick up the ball that I just spiked, and run the other direction. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? Why on earth would you do that? What, you can't take a loss? You can't take the L? What happened? What happened? And all of a sudden, my reality became a little bit more clear. And my surroundings weren't as blurred. And I could see further on in the field, there was a bigger white line and larger orange cones. And I realized that the place where I spiked the ball was not my goal. It was not the end zone. I was at the 10-yard line. I spiked the ball at the 10-yard line, and I was praising and I was excited and celebrating because I caught the ball. At that point, catching the ball doesn't matter if you don't know what to do with it once you've caught it. And I'm saying catching the love of God doesn't matter if you don't know what to do when you've caught it. Because that's only half of the play. That's only part of it. You have to be aware of your surroundings, know what your goal is, and know that once you've caught the ball, you have to run. And you have to keep running, and you cannot stop until you reach your goal. You have to keep running, regardless of the circumstances around you. This burden is heavy on my heart, and it's not just me. I know that our conference officials and people in our Lake Union, they understand the power that our youth have, that you have, to take God's love and run with it. in a way that nobody else can. And every 2 years, they have a special program, a special reunion, so to speak, a special conference. And this year, that conference is called Unstoppable. And the idea of this conference, the idea of this gathering is for all youth who are interested in the Lake Union, not just Indiana, but in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Illinois, and I think people from Ohio come too, that those who are interested, the youth, 16, like senior youth, 16 through 35, they come there and they learn and they network and they think about ways that they can run with this ball, with this love that God has given them in a way that helps get their team closer to victory. And they're not just saying it and providing it just for talk's sake. They're literally putting their money where their mouth is. And they say the ideas of the youth matter. And if they come with a proposal of how they can move the mission forward, move the goal forward of inviting people to come to Jesus, inviting people to overcome their problems in Jesus, of inviting people to become more like Jesus, they will put their money where their mouth is and match dollar for dollar up to $50,000 to move forward. It's not something to take lightly. It's not something to take for granted. And I'm thinking about our mission here at Glendale and how it extends not just in Glendale, but it extends to our community. And I think, what would it look like? What would it look like if when we find ourselves in a conversation with someone else that somehow ends up turning into a confrontation? Who knows how those things happen? A conversation turning into a confrontation, and where both parties are refusing to back down, refusing to lose this encounter. What would happen if even just one side decided, you know what? Taking into consideration my surroundings and what's going on, I'm going to be responsible and not take this situation for granted. I'm going to be responsible and I'm going to choose to let love win this conversation. It's not about them, it's not about me, it's about love. And I choose to let love win. And so instead of making them understand your point, letting love win says, I'm going to make a point of understanding them. And making that decision is the hardest thing that you can do. It comes with the loss of so much pride, but the gain of so much more. And when the other person in that situation recognizes the love that was now just given to them, now they have an opportunity to catch the love. And they have an opportunity to share that same love, to take that same moment that you experience, and they can now experience this love with someone else when they find themselves in a conversation that turns into a confrontation, and they remember the love that was shown them, and they decide, you know what? I'm going to let love win this one. And instead of making them understand my point, I'm going to make a point of understanding them. And the power that that has is something that Satan cannot touch. Amen. Because his only tool in that situation is pride. But when you get rid of pride, you let love win.